a friend of mine made this quilt for her daughter, and her daughter just wanted it simple squares so that it would look like plaid and just simple quilting. So what we decided was to quilt it a ½ inch away from the seam lines. You could, the first thing that pops to mind is that you could use the channel lock to quilt it, but the channel lock would mean that the quilt needs to be perfectly square, both with the piecer, and while Lori did a fantastic job, nobody is perfect. It would also mean that it would have to be on the machine perfectly square, and that's hard to guarantee, especially once you've turned the quilt. So I decided to use line pattern. So I'm going to show in this video how I did that. I've already quilted one direction and turned the quilt, so now I'm quilting horizontally across the other way. I'm going to start from the beginning just like I was starting a brand new quilt. So I'm going to design, sew, quilt, start new. There's already a work in progress. Do you want to replace it? Yes. Do I want to permanently erase it? Yes, erase it. I'm going to continue with my project time. It's not usually super accurate, but it's kind of fun to see. And then I'm going to choose line pattern. And I know what I already have set up, but let's pretend I don't. So I would go catalog. I want the geometric catalog. And I want the line, so there it is, continue. Okay, so right now my line is going to go exactly where I put it, but because I'm stitching a ½ inch away from my lines, I want it to automatically offset my stitching line a ½ inch from where I'm clicking with my needle. So I'm going to shift Y. Y is our horizontal axis. I'm going to click on the number pad here. I'm going to put in 0.5 and enter. And now I'm ready to start marking my quilt. I've turned off my machine so that I can put my needle low without it taking a stitch. I'm using a clicker rather than clicking on the OK button up on the IQ. So if you didn't have a clicker, every time you wanted to place it, you would be pressing the OK button. But I do have a clicker. It makes life much easier. I don't have to look up there every time I am clicking in a spot. So I have my needle lined up with the seam right on the very edge of the quilt. I'm going to click, move. I'm just moving to intersections. These squares are not huge, so I'm getting close enough that way. If it was a really big square, I would be putting clicks in places other than the intersection along the line as I go, but this is working for me. So the next intersection and click. I've clicked all the way across the quilt. I'm just coming up on the very end, and now I'm putting a click at the very edge of the quilt. So I have clicked the very edge of my quilt. I have not clicked finish yet. I'm going to go back over here to my y-axis where I'm offsetting it by ½ inch. I'm going to click on that button. Then I'm going to go up to the plus minus, click on that once, and you'll see that my shift turned to a -0.5. So I'm setting this up so I'm sewing both sides of the seams in one pass. Once I have changed to a negative offset, I'm ready to click back across the quilt. I do not need to put a click at the end. It's already stuck there. So then I'm just going to move down to my next point, going back across the quilt, click, click, and I'm going to do that all the way across. I have clicked into my last point on the quilt, so now I'm just going to come back up to the IQ and touch the finished button. So now I'm ready to sew my quilt. I did sew them just one seam at a time, so I'm going to say sew quilt. I want to sew what I just put in, continue, sew quilt, and then I have it set up so it always comes up so I can adjust. I don't need to on this one. I'm going to say finished, and the machine is going to move into place, and then set the regulated stitch length. I don't have a regulator, so that's not a big deal. I've already set my machine speed, and then as soon as I pull the thread up, I'm going to press start, and it will sew both sides of the seam for me. So the machine is stitching, and when it gets to the end of the quilt, it's just going to stitch straight down to the next line that's going back.